test. Testing 1, 2, 3. Switching.
In Moscow, where right now President Vladimir Putin is hosting U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. Critical talks have been going on for more than 3 hours as they're negotiating a potential pathway to peace in Ukraine. Let's go right to CNN's Matthew Chance. He is live for us in Moscow. Matthew, any indication from the Kremlin as far as how they think these negotiations are going?
Well, not so far, unfortunately. We're in a bit of an information sort of vacuum holding pattern at the moment. I've just this second been texting the Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, to try and get an update on if the negotiations, if the talks were coming to an end soon, if he could characterize the sort of mood in the room or anything like that. And there's just been no response. He did say earlier that there would be no time limit on these talks. They started about 3¼ hours ago. And so it's they've been going on for some time. They're obviously quite in-depth and intensive. And I was told earlier as well by the Kremlin that there'll be a briefing afterwards by one of the officials, the Russian officials, that's inside, the room at the table, Yuri Ushakov, who's the presidential aide on foreign affairs, sitting, if you see those pictures of the table, sitting at...
Yuri Ushakov is the person that Steve Witkoff essentially coached or instructed on how to talk to Donald Trump. So you have Jared Kushner, son-in-law, no idea who this lady is, Steve Witkoff, that looks like Creole something, Dmitry, the economic person for Putin. Yeah, so this essentially kind of comes as this meeting is essentially Witkoff is bringing the 1920 revised plan of the 28-point plan from last week, and of course that was a Russian wish list. So.
At Vladimir Putin's right hand. The big challenge for Steve Witkoff, President Trump's special envoy, and for Jared Kushner, President Trump's son-in-law, who's also in these meetings, will be to try and sort of gauge whether the Kremlin is open to the kinds of compromises, the kind of solutions that have been hammered out between US and Ukrainian officials over the course of the past the past week or so in Geneva and more recently at the weekend in Florida, where they tried to sort of look for creative solutions to get around some of Ukraine's big red lines, like its desire to join NATO in the future, like the call by Russia for it to give up territory, for Ukraine to give up territory that it has annexed but not yet conquered. These are huge problems with the US-backed peace plan. There are some solutions that are being discussed, though not agreed on, and now Witkoff and Kushner are presenting those solutions to the Kremlin to see if there's any appetite at all from Vladimir Putin to do a deal. Back to you.
All right, Matthew Chance, live for us in Moscow. Thank you. And let's go now to CNN's Nick Payton-Walsh, who is in Kyiv. Nick, what is the Ukrainian view of this negotiation?
I think, in short, there's great anxiety as to what exactly it will be that Steve Witkoff has presented to the Kremlin during these extensive talks. Now, clearly, it is the product of hours, if not days, of him really, for the first time, I think, sitting in detail with the Ukrainian negotiating team in Florida at the weekend, even a second meeting early Monday morning between Witkoff and the top Ukrainian negotiator. Then that plan on its way to Moscow. Witkoff speaking on the phone to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron of France. The UK's Keir Starmer getting European allies briefed as well. And the tone from Zelensky, one I think that's interestingly tried to emphasise two issues here: the need for dignity in whatever particular proposal is coming forwards, some kind of suggestion that while they are very much on board and trying to be cooperative, they're not entirely sure exactly how this is going to be phrased, and positioning it, I think, much as an American proposal here, although be in no doubt they are fully briefed, possibly not signed signed up to what Witkoff is presenting there, and at the same time too emphasizing to Ukrainians for the need for security guarantees, so that if there are painful concessions made by Ukraine, that there may be security guarantees.
Well, remember, the concessions essentially is like all of Donbass region, so Donetsk, Luhansk, even the regions that the Russians hasn't been occupied. They want they want the entirety, and that might be a bad idea just because that's been fortified for for the past decade. Um, yeah, I think that if the Ukrainians gave that up, it might be open season. So.
From the United States and Europe that mean a third or a fourth invasion, however you want to count it, isn't something they have to face in the months ahead. That was an impassioned part of Zelensky's speech today in Ireland, where he's been, some might say, in a holding pattern in case he has to hop it quickly to the United States to meet President Trump. Short flight time from there. And at the same time, too, we hear less from Zelensky the notion of red lines about giving up territory. He has been, indeed, he said, seeing his negotiators spend 6.5 hours discussing where the front lines might potentially be drawn if there is some kind of deal. So it seems like territory is possibly on the cards here, but notably too, after weeks of leaks about 28 points, 19 points.
Here's the problem with Zelensky and his, I guess, his tours to Europe. They're pretty. This is gonna sound bad, but they're pretty useless. Because the Europeans are not gonna do anything without the American or Trump's approval. Of course, they can send more military support, more humanitarian. I mean, they they essentially can't even impose sanctions without some stipulation from the United States. So, I mean, Zelensky's getting all of these stand-up ovations and all of these applauses. Every time he does one of these speech, it's sure it might be it's I don't know if it might just be for PR. What all the Europeans feel about him, and I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's just that it, it it's pretty pointless. Is what I'm trying to say.
Different plans. We know very little of the concrete details of what Witkoff is presenting. I think that's designed to not offend the Kremlin by them reading about the plan in the media first, and possibly too to ensure that Zelensky isn't publicly seen to have signed up to a concession that may later be refused by Putin. But ultimately, Ukrainians here are seeing Russia progress on the front lines, claim with probably some degree of accuracy their control.
Let's look at some of the peace plans that was discussed. Let's see if I can merge these. So here's some of the peace plan. This is the original peace plan that it's been called the Russian wish list. So Ukrainian sovereignty will be confirmed. I'm not sure what that really means, but okay. A comprehensive non-aggression agreement will be concluded between Russia, Ukraine. Mic check, mic check. Okay, I think my mic just died for a second. Yeah, everybody's just gonna hug it out, pretend that nothing ever happened. Yeah, I'm not saying that, obviously Russians are not gonna be persecuted for war crimes, ever. So yeah, it is expected that Russia will not invade neighboring countries and NATO will not expand further. Um, yeah, I don't know about that. Um, because that's so not only this is a peace plan that's towards like between Ukraine and Russia, does this mean that NATO will permanently be at 32 members? So what if, one day, I don't know, Japan, Australia, certain other countries around the world that have interest, uh, maybe some other potential European, but what about all of the NATO, uh, all of the countries who already expressed interest in joining NATO, who already applied? Do those just get rejected? Um, the thing is, what's to stop Russia uh, from invading neighboring countries? A dialogue will be held between Russia and NATO, mediated by the United States to resolve all security issues and create conditions for de-escalation in order to ensure global security and increase opportunity for cooperation in future economic development. I mean, that's you're just saying we're doing peace plan for the better of the world. Ukraine will receive reliable security guarantees. Well, I'm not I don't believe it until I see it. So the size of the Ukrainian armed forces would be limited to 600,000 personnel. Before the war, it was around 250,000. At the moment, they're sitting at 800 to 850,000. Um, last time I checked. Ukraine agrees to enshrine its constitution that it will not join NATO, and NATO agrees to include in its statute a provision that Ukraine will not be admitted in the future. So I don't know why Ukraine needs to enshrine in their constitution, because essentially for a NATO constitution, for NATO, you need all 32 members to um, to unanimously vote for any accession for a country to join. I mean, United States could essentially just say, we will never uh, agree to this. I don't know why that's it, Um, so, and NATO agrees to include in their statute a provision, so some sort of memorandum within NATO, um, you know, that reciprocates. NATO agrees not to station troops in Ukraine. Hmm, okay. Yeah, no comments. European fighter jets will be stationed in Poland. Yeah, I think that's going to be a hard no. Um, I don't know why this would be included. Um, yeah, the U.S. guarantee. Okay, the U.S. will receive compensation for the guarantee. If Ukraine invades Russia, it will lose the guarantee. Okay, if Russia invades Ukraine, in addition to a decisive coordinated military response, all global sanctions will be reinstated, recognition of the new territory and other benefits of this deal will be revoked. Okay, I mean, that's you just going back to what's going on right now. So, nothing new. If Ukraine launches a missile at Moscow or St. Petersburg without cause, the security guarantee will be deemed invalid. So, yeah, I'm not sure what the guarantee is. Um, It's just saying that if you break it, the truth, if both sides break the agreement, the peace plan, it, back to square one. Um, Ukraine is eligible for EU membership and will receive short-term preferential access to the European market while this issue is being considered. Yeah, so I mean, I think one of the issue was I think Russians were like, yeah, we're okay with Ukraine being a part of the EU, but not NATO. So a powerful globe, a powerful global package of measures to rebuild Ukraine, including but not limited to the creation of Ukraine Development Fund to invest in fast-growing industries, including tech, data centers, and AI. The United States will cooperate with Ukraine to jointly rebuild, develop, and modernize and operate Ukraine's gas infrastructure, including pipeline and storage facilities. Yeah, Joint efforts to, so all of this is under 12. Oh, wow, okay. The United States will cooperate with Ukraine to jointly, okay, I said that, joint efforts to rehabilitate war-affected areas for the restoration, reconstruction, and modernization of cities and residential areas. Infrastructure development, extraction of minerals and natural gases. Yeah, I almost think this is essentially a way for United States to siphon. Yeah, remember, self-interest. The World Bank will develop a special financing package to accelerate these efforts. Russia will integrate into the global economy. I mean, I feel like this is a bigger one for Russia, but the lifting of sanctions will be discussed and agreed upon in stages and on a case-by-case basis. Oh, so will be the United States will enter a long-term economic cooperation agreement for mutual development in the areas of energy, natural resources, infrastructure. Okay, so yeah, so pretty much they're just gonna be economic partners and will be invited to rejoin the G8. That's a pretty big deal, in my opinion. But frozen funds will be used as follows: 100 billion. So I think there's 300 or so billion of frozen assets in Europe, and I think 2/3 of it are spread out, and then 1/3 of it is in Belgium. Belgium is pretty, or Brussels. Brussels is pretty pretty strong on not releasing it without some sort of a European collectiveness to come together. So the U.S. will receive 100 billion in frozen. Brussels also holds about 140, 150 billion. In frozen Russian assets will be invested in U.S.-led effort to rebuild and invest. Okay. The US will receive 50% of the profits from this venture. Man, you see what I mean about the US is trying to siphon? Europe will add 100 billion to increase the amount of investment available for Ukraine's reconstruction. Frozen European funds will be unfrozen. Huh? Frozen Russian funds, maybe? The remainder of the frozen Russian funds will be invested in a separate US-Russia investment vehicle that will implement joint projects, blah, blah, blah. So essentially, 1/3 of it will be used for US and Ukraine, and whatever money they make from that, 50% goes to the United States, and then another 1/3 of it, well, the United States and Russia will use. So, yeah. A joint American-Russian working group on security issues will be established to promote and ensure compliance with all provisions of this agreement. A joint American-Russian working group on security issues will be established to promote, ensure compliance of. Okay, so this is just a way for both parties to uphold their end of the bargain. Russia will enshrine in law its policy of non-aggression towards. I don't know what that means. Yeah, so don't hate, appreciate. The United States and Russia will agree to extend the validity of treaties of the non-proliferation and control of nuclear weapons, including the START 1 treaty. Yeah, okay, I mean, that's more between the United States and Russia. That's nothing to do with this, okay? 18. Ukraine agrees to be non-nuclear state in accordance with the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, okay? I mean, they're already not, but the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant will be launched under the supervision of IAEA, and the electricity produced will be distributed equally between Russia and Ukraine 50-50. Yeah, that's bull. I mean, obviously this whole thing is lame, but both the countries undertake to implement educational programs in schools and in society aimed to promote understanding and tolerance of different culture and eliminating racism and prejudice. I mean, maybe the United States can take a chapter out of this. So if we're looking at this from like a generational, you know, viewpoint, I mean, not do the Russians hate Ukrainians for any specific reason? I don't, I can't think of that. Um, yeah, I mean, but if you ask the other way around, I'm pretty confident that a lot of Ukrainians are not too fond of Russians these days. So, um, yeah, I don't expect the next 3 generations of Ukrainians to really, yeah. So good luck with that though. You, yep, Ukraine would adopt EU rules on religious tolerance and the protection of linguistic minorities. Hmm. Okay. Both countries will agree to abolish all discriminatory measures and guarantee the rights of Ukrainian and Russian media and education. Okay. That just sounds like propaganda. All Nazi ideology and activities must be rejected and prohibited. Okay. Okay, so here's what we were looking at when it comes to like the Donbass region. So you have the Donetsk and the Luhansk. These are the major areas, and you have these smaller. So the Russians, I believe, recently just took over Pokrovsk area, but they want this entire area. And the yellow is essentially the either the combat, the frontline area now, or the areas that were recently or that were gained back. But yeah, I disagree with. I know the Russians want all of this. Uh, it's not that I don't want to give this, all of Donbass or all of, however, it's that the Ukrainians had, you know, a decade plus, 10 years or so of fortifying this, and that's why the Russians are having a hard time breaking this in 24 months. So, all right, continuing. Uh, that's the Zaporizhia region. This is the southern, the Kherson. So here's the front line, the nuclear power plant, and you got the Crimea bottom. So, all right, 21 territories. Crimea, Luhansk, Donetsk, and Luhansk and Donetsk would be recognized as de facto Russia, including by the United States. So essentially what this means that right now on an international order, these Crimea is not viewed as part of Russia. However, United States or yeah, not a part of Russia. However, um, this peace plan essentially solidify and cement these regions as a part of Russia by the United States. Now there's a de facto and de jure. So de facto, I'm assuming it's international recognition. De jure is like Crimea right now, but by law, by their law or something. Kherson and Zaporizhia will be frozen along the line of contact, which mean de facto recognition along the line of contact. So this is the area. Essentially, what you see on this map is the stopping point. Russia will relinquish other agreed territories it controls outside of the 5 regions. Yeah, I don't know about that. Ukraine forces will withdraw from parts of Donetsk that they currently control. This withdrawal line would be considered a neutral demilitarized buffer zone, internationally recognized as territories belong to the Russian Federation. Yeah, so that's the problem. Russian forces will not enter this demilitarized zone. Yeah, yeah, maybe maybe not after this, but I don't know. There's really no guarantees of what's going to be further down the road. After agreeing on future territorial arrangement, both Russian Federation and Ukraine undertake not to change these arrangements by force. Any security guarantees will not apply in the event of breach of this commitment. So here's the bigger map. You got the Luhansk, Donetsk, and then you got the bottom part of the Zaporizhia and the Kherson region. So yeah, that's a pretty big chunk that the Russians control. Russia will not prevent Ukraine from using the Dnipro River for commercial activities, and agreements will be reached on the free transport of grain across the Black Sea. So, yeah, the Black Sea, because of this area, is heavily contested. You have the Russians, their navy. I think they pretty much moved out of this area just because of how heavy it gets hit. Humanitarian committee will be established to resolve outstanding issues. All remaining prisoners and body will be exchanged on a all-for-all basis. All civilian detainees and hostage will be returned, including children. There's 20,000, I believe, 20,000 kids or children that are still over in Russia. I don't know how many we've gotten back. 5%, I don't know, maybe less than 5% of the Ukrainian kids have been returned. A family reunification program will be implemented. Measures will be taken to alleviate the suffering of the victims of the conflict. Ukraine will hold election in 100 days. Okay. All parties involved in this conflict will receive full amnesty for their actions during the war and agree not to make any claims or consider any complaints. Yeah, so this is pretty much saying, you know, I forgive you, you forgive me, everything, everybody hug it out. It's kind of the first point. For the past 30 years or something, or any complaints in the future. This agreement will be legally binding. Its implementation will be monitored and guaranteed by the Peace Council, headed by Trump. Sanctions will be imposed for violations. My question is, if all of these, what happens if Trump is dead, or passed away, or he's not the president anymore? So yeah, once all party agrees to this memorandum, the ceasefire will take effect immediately after both sides retreat to agreed points to begin implementation of the agreement. Yeah. So that's the 28-point peace plan. Let's finish this
Control
video.
over the strategic hub of Pokrovsk on the eastern front lines, and also recognizing the cold here, the hard winter ahead, the damage done by the nightly barrages here, and ultimately to Zelensky's domestic political weakness owing to a corruption scandal that seems to rumble on. I think they want a deal. They just urgently don't want a deal that means Russia starts this all over again a few months down the line after getting some land without a fight.
Yeah, certainly a concern there. Nick Payton-Walsh, live for us in Ukraine. Thank you.
And we are going to stay on this story for more perspective. I want to welcome former U.S. Ambassador.
Oh, I forgot to mention, this big deal kind of came recently with a scandal with the Ministry of Energy from Ukraine. So, yeah, 100 million scandal.
To Ukraine, William Taylor, who joins the show live from Kiev. Great to have you with us, Ambassador.
Thank you, Linda. It's good to be here.
So as we speak, Vladimir Putin is meeting right now with the U.S. officials, envoy Steve Witkoff, and of course, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, after earlier accusing Europe of blocking the U.S. peace effort. What did the original U.S. peace deal look like before European and Ukrainian feedback? And how much has changed since then?
Linda, we don't know exactly how much has changed. We do know about the first deal, the so-called 28-point plan, which was apparently drafted by the Russians, given to Steve Witkoff, who made some changes. And the Russians then leaked the 28-point plan. So you and we all read every point of that plan. And people were pretty surprised at how pro-Russian it was until they learned that the Russians had drafted it. The Russians had put into that plan things that they want. And they were pleased with that.
I mean, if he said the Russians or Witkoff changed it a little bit, I mean, what did he change?
And President Putin undoubtedly liked that plan since his folks had drafted it, and the Europeans and the Ukrainians didn't. And so Marco Rubio got the Europeans and Ukrainians together and came up with a different plan, either 19 or 20 points, that is much more to the Ukrainians' liking.
And of course, we heard from the Ukrainian president today, Zelensky, saying that any settlement must safeguard Ukrainian territorial integrity. Given the current Russian military advances we're seeing right now on the ground, especially around those contested towns, what would be acceptable to Kyiv at this point in time? Where is the red line?
Linda, they're going to have to decide that, but most Ukrainians that I talk to here acknowledge the fact that the Russians occupied 19% of their country. Donbass, Crimea, 19% of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory is occupied by the Russians. And the Ukrainians don't like it, but they are not ready to try to take that back militarily. So the way that they see it is it will come back someday. So we're not going to recognize that 19% that's occupied by the Russians as part of Russia. We will not recognize that, nor should anyone. But they will acknowledge the fact that 19% is under the occupation of the Russians. That may be the way that they can move this forward.
And given the advancements we're seeing from Russia on the battlefield, claiming another town in that Donetsk region, how does that shape Ukraine's view going into these negotiations?
As you say, the Russians have slowly and at great cost in terms of Russian lives, which Putin apparently doesn't care about, have ground out small gains in the east along that line, including, as you say, the possibility of some portion of that town called Pokrovsk. The Ukrainians say it's not yet lost, but the Russians have been grinding toward Pokrovsk for now over a year and a half. So it's been a long time, a lot of Russian soldiers killed. And that's what's going on now. What needs to happen, of course, is the Ukrainians getting an additional supply of weapons that they can use to stop the Russians, and then stop the Russians from moving forward, and then having a ceasefire, which is what they're talking about now.
And of course, we've heard from European leaders warning that any deal must essentially include them.
I think that's pretty significant to see Putin in military uniform. I mean, to me, that just screams like we're not going to back off. We're not going to back down,
Arguing that any U.S.-Russian deal, an agreement alone would not would place an undue burden really on Ukraine. So with such divisions among allies, who really sets the terms here, and can a lasting peace be negotiated without full European support?
Europeans have a big role to play. They are talking about providing a security guarantee to the Ukrainians to ensure that the Russians don't invade again, to deter the Russians from invading again. And the Europeans have stepped up in that planning. They also have a big stake in the funds. Linda, you've probably reported that there's $300 billion worth of Russian central bank reserves that are frozen in Western banks, and mostly in European, mostly in Belgian institutions. And so the Europeans have a big role to play, and they should certainly be consulted, and they should be part of these discussions.
Yeah, and we've certainly heard Russia put through ideas about how they want those funds to be used. William Taylor, we'll have to leave it there for now. Former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine. Thanks very much.
Yeah, I think that's kind of all I got. We're just waiting for what the meeting concludes from Steve Witkoff and the Russian side. So once there's some updates on that, I'll update everybody on the new findings. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow, all that YouTube stuff. So till next time, thanks.